From East, in Hebrews 2:14, it says that Satan has the power of death. I was taught as a kid that God controls everything. Is that not true? Well, yes and no. Let's go on. All right. So, thanks, Pastor. You may have heard the term sovereign. Sovereign is something a lot of churches talk about, especially if you use the New International Version, that they have actually added that term over 300 times. I hate that about the New International Version. The term sovereign is talking about people that, in fact, are talking about God being in control of all things. Now, what you have to understand with this, guys, is that ultimately it is true that God is in control of all things, and that's in the final analysis, okay? When everything's said and done, then the reality is that God will have the final say, and he will be completely in charge. However, you have to understand that is not the case here on earth. For the record, you're not alone in this. Was this east or west, hon? East? Okay, so you're not alone, guys, in that. I was taught the same thing. And therein is the problem that people have with the concept of why bad things happen to good people. Because if God's in charge of everything, that means he killed my first wife. Now, they don't use that term. They say he took her. Well, she was alive before he took her, so in my mind, he killed her, all right? I mean, that's really what happened. Let's just be straight about what really happened here. And so what you have to realize is that there's a reason Hebrews 2:14 says that Satan holds the power of death, because death was never God's idea. That was the thing Satan was trying to introduce into this whole thing. He was trying to mess everything up and did a pretty effective job, in that way. If you look, remember 1 John 5:19 says the whole world lies in the power of the evil one. And so, guys, you have to understand, you have to understand that if we look around, we're going to find out that Satan is called the god of this age. If you remember when Satan actually confronted Jesus, he said, this whole world has been handed over to me, and Jesus didn't go, He didn't argue with him about it. He didn't say, no, my Father is the one in charge of all this. The reality is when we chose sin and Satan over God, we stupidly put Satan in charge of all this. And so he's called the prince of the power of the air. I mean, the Bible actually does make this fairly clear that this is the reality that we have to deal with. And so what I would say is in our existence over at East, in our existence, it is not true that God is in charge of everything. And that is the explanation as why you can understand why bad things happen to good people. If in fact we are in a situation, think about it this way. You've probably heard the term free will, as in free willy? No. Anyway, so free will means that I have a choice of what I'm going to do with God. Now think about that for a minute. If we just logically reason that out, if I have a choice what I do with God, then God can't be totally sovereign because I have a choice. And so by definition, unless you're going to be an absolute Calvinist, and for the reason a Calvinist takes the position that God chooses who goes to heaven and who goes to hell and all kinds of stuff that's just crazy stuff. The reality is that there is a level of free will that we have, and therefore, while God is ultimately sovereign, he is not in fact sovereign. Now, that being the case, God is fighting every step of the way on our behalf on enemy soil to help us to be able to deal with this world. Because sometimes people say, well, then why, if God has no power? No. God's got tremendous power. Look at it this way. If you read about the qualifications for Satan, who he is, he's a murderer. He's a murderer from the beginning. He's a liar. He can't tell the truth. John 8:44. 1 John 5:8 said he prowls around like a roaring lion seeking someone. I think that's a fascinating term, someone. He doesn't care who. I mean, think about it, someone to devour. So he'll destroy even people who follow him or Christians. He's indiscriminate in that way. And so you've got this guy, he's called the beast, he's called the dragon, the demon, Satan, all kinds of different things. And so you've got this guy, he is evil to the core. And all he wants to do is destroy and maim and hurt. One of the best ways to be able to see this, I've always thought this is something we've overlooked. If you ever looked in the New Testament when you see people that are demon-possessed, think about that, demon-possessed. What ends up happening, and I've talked about that before, so I won't go into that whole concept of being demon-possessed. It was something specific for the first century primarily. It can certainly happen, but you have to invite it in today. We'll stop there. Now, what you have there is every time you see somebody who is demon-possessed, do you ever see the condition they're in? they're deaf, or they can't speak, or like the Gadarenes, he's hitting himself, gnashing him with rocks, trying to kill himself. He's super strong, but yet he's running around naked constantly, freaking out. I mean, what you see is, remember the one guy his son kept throwing himself right after the Mount of Transfiguration. His son kept throwing himself in the fire, trying to kill himself. Think about it. Demon possessed, that's what you get. It's not a good picture. This is no, flicking through the daisies doing petals. That's not demon possession, right? This is ugly and scary and awful and dangerous. That's Satan. So getting back to the thing, how powerful must God be to be in the middle of enemy territory with a dude that is that hideous and that loathsome? And by and large, most of us, day in and day out, we do okay. How much protection? I really do think we're going to get to heaven, and God's going to go, that's what I've been doing this whole time. And we're going to be shocked and horrified. How protected it? I mean, seriously, you driving here tonight. Satan's trying to kill you every chance he gets, guys. And we have to understand, God is incredibly powerful. And what happens is, God does this amazing thing with this very, very broken world and keeps the majority of people so safe that when, in fact, he can't, and that's the key, he cannot stop, like my first wife dying, 3 days of a brain tumor. He cannot stop that. When that happens, we go, real nice, God, where were you? And if I was God, things would be a little different. I mean, that's after everything he's done, because, guys, we lose sight of how protected we are. I pray about this all the time. Walking up and down right outside here. We live in such a dangerous world. We are so amazingly protected. Well, you just saw this last weekend. If you want to go to the microscopic level, if you want to go to the atomic level. Guys, we're not exploding right now. That's God. And so we've got to understand the power that he has. It's mind-blowing. And remember, he can't be exposed to his complete power because he's limited himself by giving us free will, at which point we very intelligently chucked him and put Satan in charge, and yet he's still walking us through that process. So that's why we pray. God is that powerful. Don't ever forget that. Remember nuclear glue, guys. Stick that in your head. On the atomic level, we're not exploding like a nuclear bomb because Jesus Christ holds all things together by the word of his power. That's how much power is there, keeping everything together so that we can play out this scenario. So, pray to God. He's very, very powerful. But understand, is it true that he controls everything? No. We took that away from him when we made the choice we made.